The royal healer would not look at her. That was the first thing Seraphina noticed beneath the black marble arches of Blackthorn's throne hall. Not the 100 wolves packed shoulder to shoulder along the walls, not the frost crawling over the tall windows, not even the council lords in their fur-lined cloaks, watching her like merchants appraising a cracked vase. Healer Marek kept his eyes on the parchment trembling in his hands, his thumb smearing the red wax seal until it stained his skin. Beside Seraphina, Alpha King Darius Blackthorn stood still as carved stone, one hand resting on the wolf-head arm of his throne, his wedding band flashing cold under the moon lamps. "Read it," said Lord Calder from the council dais, his voice dry as old paper. A servant near the back dropped a coal shovel. The clang snapped through the hall. Seraphina's fingers curled around the thin silver chain at her throat. The queen's chain Darius had fastened there 2 winters ago with warm hands, and a promise whispered against her hair. Marek swallowed. After 3 full moon trials, blood rites, and lunar examination, his voice caught, and for one foolish second Seraphina thought he might refuse. Then his shoulders folded inward. Her Grace, Queen Seraphina Vale Blackthorn, shows no viable sign of carrying a royal heir. The condition is permanent. The room did not gasp. It exhaled. A slow, satisfied release from every noble who had smiled at her dinners, kissed her knuckles, praised her patience. Seraphina felt Darius shift beside her, and the mate bond in her ribs tightened like a hand closing around glass. She turned to him, waiting for the flash of anger, for his wolf to rise, for him to tear the parchment in half and demand the tests be done again. He only stared at the healer. His jaw moved once. "Permanent," he repeated. Marek nodded too quickly. "Yes, Alpha." Darius stepped down from the throne platform. His boots struck the marble with measured, terrible quiet. When he stopped in front of Seraphina, she could smell winter cedar on his coat and the iron bite of rage under his skin, but his face stayed smooth. That almost broke her more than shouting would have. "Darius," she whispered, low enough that only he should have heard. His eyes flicked to hers. For half a heartbeat, the man who used to leave honey cakes outside her library door looked back at her. Then Lord Calder cleared his throat. The bond went cold. Darius lifted his hand to her neck. "A crown," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "cannot rest on an empty future." Seraphina stopped breathing. His fingers found the clasp of the queen's chain. Click. The tiny sound cut deeper than any blade. The silver slid from her throat into his palm, and with it went every title the court had ever pretended to give her. "By law of Blackthorn," Darius said, "Seraphina Vale is released from royal standing and cast beyond our borders before moonrise." Someone near the council dais murmured, "Merciful." Seraphina looked at Darius then, not pleading, not bowing, not giving them the broken spectacle they had gathered to see. She reached up, touched the bare place at her throat, and dipped her chin once. "May your full future keep you warm, my king." His eyes flinched. "Good." The guards opened the throne hall doors, and winter rushed in, sharp enough to sting tears from her eyes before she could stop them. She walked past bowed servants and watching nobles, down the obsidian steps, across the courtyard where snow had already buried the black roses along the walls. She had no cloak, no gloves. Just the thin white court dress chosen that morning because Calder's wife had said queens should look pure for medical announcements. Halfway to the outer gate, pain bloomed beneath her left collarbone. Seraphina staggered, pressing a hand to the silver birthmark she had hidden all her life, the strange crescent and crown shape no healer had ever explained. Heat seared through the fabric. A dark thread of smoke curled between her fingers. Behind her, high in the throne hall, a wolf began to howl. The howl chased Seraphina through the outer gate and into the white road beyond Blackthorn, thin at first, then breaking into a dozen answering voices that rolled over the walls like grief the castle itself was not allowed to show. The guards would not meet her eyes as the iron portcullis groaned down behind her. One of them, a boy with freckles across his nose, shifted his weight like he might offer his cloak, but the captain's hand clamped around his shoulder. "Eyes forward," the captain muttered. Seraphina kept walking. Snow bit her bare feet until the pain became a steady, bright thing. Her dress dragged through slush and caught on frozen weeds along the road. Every breath scraped. Under her palm, the mark beneath her collarbone pulsed hot, then hotter, like a coal buried under skin. She pulled her hand away and saw a crescent burned faintly into her pale palm, silver as moonlight. "No," she whispered, though she did not know what she was refusing. Behind the walls, in the throne hall now emptied of spectators, Darius moved at last. The calm cracked so violently that Marek stumbled back against the healer's table. Darius seized him by the front of his gray coat and slammed him into the carved pillar beneath the moon crest. Glass vials rattled. One shattered on the floor, spilling blue tincture over the black marble. "Tell me it was absolute," Darius said, low enough that the servants frozen near the curtains could barely hear, but every wolf in the room felt the command in it. "Tell me I did not just cut out my mate in front of half the kingdom on a guess." Marek's lips parted. His eyes flicked to Lord Calder, who stood at the council dais with his hands folded over his cane. "The trials were clear, Alpha." "That is not what I asked." Darius's fingers tightened until seams popped along Marek's collar. "Can she bear a royal heir?" Marek's throat bobbed. "No," the answer came fast. Too fast. Darius released him, but his gaze stayed on the parchment as Marek folded it with shaking hands. The healer tucked it into the inner left pocket of his coat, missed, cursed under his breath, then shoved it into the right pocket instead, the pocket where he kept court correspondence, not medical records. Darius saw it. His wolf surged hard enough to sharpen his vision, to bring out the sour scent of fear under Marek's medicinal oils. Calder tapped his cane once. "Your people need certainty, Your Majesty. The border packs already whisper. The old families will not follow a deadline." Darius looked toward the doors Seraphina had walked through. A thin trail of melted snow crossed the threshold where her bare feet had passed. For one heartbeat, his hand moved toward it. Then Calder said, "Civil war begins with hesitation." Outside, the wind lifted Seraphina's hair from her shoulders and hurled ice against her cheeks. She had been queen at sunrise. By moonrise, if she survived to see it, she would be a nameless omega on a road where exiles froze in ditches and rogues hunted anything that smelled like weakness. The mate bond tugged once behind her ribs, raw and unwanted. She pressed 2 fingers to it, remembering Darius laughing in a summer orchard, juice from a stolen peach on his thumb, telling her, "If they ever make you feel small, come find me." Her laugh came out cracked in the dark. "I did," she said to the empty road. The burning under her collarbone flared so sharply she dropped to one knee. Snow hissed around her as if it had touched a stove. Beneath the dirty hem of her dress, the ground trembled, not much, just enough to loosen powder from the pine branches ahead. From the northern tree line, far beyond the last blackthorn lantern, something answered the burn in her skin, a low horn, deep and mournful, calling from a kingdom no southern wolf crossed and lived to mock. Seraphina lifted her head. Between the trees, 2 pale eyes opened in the dark. The eyes blinked once, then rose higher, and Seraphina understood they were not floating in the dark. They belonged to something standing on the creek bank ahead, half hidden between black pines glazed with ice. A wolf stepped into the open, ribs sharp beneath a mangy gray coat, one ear torn to a rag. Then another slid from the trees. then 3 more. Their paws made no sound in the snow. Seraphina reached for a weapon she did not have and found only the burnt crescent on her palm. Behind her, far down the road, hoofbeats cracked through the night. Blackthorn riders. Not many. 4, maybe 5. Enough to drag back an exile who had not cleared the border by moonrise. Enough to prove to Calder's watching windows that Darius Blackthorn could finish what he had started. Seraphina looked left. The creek lay frozen in broken plates beneath a skin of moonlit frost. Beyond it, the pines thickened toward the forbidden north. Her breath fogged white. "I am not prey," she said, and hated how small the word sounded. The lead rogue smiled around yellow teeth. It shifted halfway, too human in the shoulders, too wolf in the face, and rasped, "Everything bleeding is prey." Seraphina backed toward the creek. Her heel struck something soft. A body. She jerked down and saw a young man in a white patrol cloak half buried beside the bank, dark hair frozen to his forehead, a broken spear clutched in one blue-white hand. Frostmere stitching marked his color, a silver pine and moon. His eyes fluttered open. "Run," he breathed. "Tunnels. Tell the king," the rogues lunged. Seraphina did the only thing her body knew before her mind could call it foolish. She threw herself over the wounded scout and lifted both hands. Heat burst from the mark under her collarbone, racing down her arms. The air rang like struck crystal. For a heartbeat, a thin silver shimmer curved above them, no thicker than ice on a window. The first rogue hit it and flew backward with a yelp that tore into the trees. Seraphina gasped. The shield flickered. The second rogue slammed into it. Pain split through her ribs, bright and intimate, like the mate bond itself had been yanked by a hook. Behind her, the Blackthorn riders thundered closer. "There," a man shouted. "By royal order, seize her." The scout beneath her whispered, winter-crowned. His voice faded. "Don't," Seraphina said through clenched teeth, though she did not know if she meant the rogues, the riders, or the old name falling out of a stranger's mouth. The shield cracked. A rogue's claw punched through and caught her sleeve, ripping white silk from shoulder to wrist. Cold swallowed her skin. She grabbed the scout's broken spear and drove the blunt end into the wolf's throat. It staggered, snarling, and the shield shattered in a spray of silver sparks. Seraphina fell hard onto the creek ice. It groaned under her hip. The Blackthorn horses skidded to a stop at the road, their riders raising crossbows, not at the rogues, but at her. By command of the council, the lead rider called, his beard crusted with frost, "The former queen is to be contained until further judgment." Seraphina laughed once, breathless and sharp. "Former queen," she said, dragging herself in front of the injured scout again. "Current target." "How tidy." The rogue pack drew close from one side. Blackthorn bolts aimed from the other. The creek ice cracked beneath her palm, and the burn under her collarbone answered with a pulse so hot she smelled scorched cloth. Then the mournful horn sounded again, closer this time. The pines behind the rogues exploded with movement. White wolves poured from the trees like a snowstorm given teeth, silent except for the churn of paws and the snap of branches. At their center came a black horse with frost steaming off its mane, and on it rode a man in a dark fur mantle, bareheaded in the bitter cold, his eyes a pale green that fixed first on the wounded scout, then on Seraphina's smoking birthmark. Every Frostmere wolf around him lowered its head. Not to him. To her. The rider drew his sword, voice calm enough to freeze blood. "Step away from the woman," he said. "Now." The Blackthorn rider's crossbow dipped an inch, then came back up as pride fought sense. "She belongs to Blackthorn jurisdiction," he barked, but his horse sidestepped, foam freezing white along the bit. The man on the black horse did not raise his voice. "You are 10 yards inside Frostmere snow." A white wolf beside him bared its teeth, and the sound was not a growl so much as a door being locked. The rogues broke first, scattering into the pines with Frostmere patrols flashing after them. The Blackthorn riders followed slower, backing their horses toward the southern road, and Seraphina held her breath until the last crossbow vanished between the trees. Only then did her knees give out. The rider swung down before she hit the ice. His hands caught her under the arms, gloved, steady, not gentle enough to insult her. "I have him," she rasped, twisting toward the scout. "Do you?" His pale green eyes flicked to her torn sleeve, her bare feet, the smoke curling from her collar. "Because from here it looks like you have frostbite, blood on your dress, and enough stubbornness to kill 3 healers. Then bring 4. One corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile. "Rowan," the wounded scout whispered. "Alpha, the tunnels." The man's face changed. "Not much. Just a tightening around the eyes, a grief practiced into silence. Save your breath, Aemon." He lifted 2 fingers, and his patrol moved like one body, wrapping the scout in a fur-lined litter. When Rowan turned back to Seraphina, his gaze dropped to the crescent mark half visible through the ripped fabric. The wolves around them lowered their eyes again. His jaw set. "You come through my gates alive," he said. But not unguarded. Frostmere's mountain entrance opened at dawn between 2 cliffs of blue ice, iron doors groaning wide enough for sleds, horses, and wolves to pass into a city carved under stone. Seraphina expected cells. Instead, she got a narrow room with a wool blanket, a basin of hot water, and 2 guards outside who pretended not to listen when her teeth chattered. By the second night, she was in the infirmary because sitting still made the broken bond in her ribs ache worse. She washed bandages in water pink with old blood, ground bitterroot until her palms stung, and held cups to the lips of fevered wolves who watched her first with suspicion, then with something quieter. Rowan came often, always at the edge of the lamplight, sleeves rolled to carry firewood or lift men too proud to groan. An alpha king, hauling ash buckets without a word. Once, she saw him tuck his own cloak around Aemon's sleeping shoulders. He caught her looking. "What?" "Blackthorn kings do not empty ash buckets. Maybe that is why Blackthorn smells like smoke." She almost laughed. It hurt, so she looked away. Near midnight, a little girl with dark braids sat rigid on a cot, staring at the wall while healers coaxed and failed. "Leora hasn't spoken since the fever took her mother," an old nurse murmured. Seraphina sat beside the child and, without knowing why, hummed a low prayer that tasted of pine smoke and cold stars. The room went still. Leora's fingers crept into hers. "Moon," the girl whispered. A bowl clattered to the floor. Rowan stood in the doorway, all color gone from his face. "Where," he said, each word careful as a blade, "did you learn that song?" Seraphina's humming died in her throat. The infirmary smelled of boiled linen, bitterroot, and banked coals, but suddenly all she could taste was snow. Leora's small hand tightened around her fingers. "I don't know," Seraphina said. Her voice came out rough from sleeplessness. It was just there. Rowan stepped fully into the room, and every wolf who had been pretending not to stare found urgent work in folded blankets and empty cups. He looked at the child first, softening just enough to brush 2 knuckles over her braid. "You did well, little pine." Leora tucked her face into Seraphina's sleeve, whispering, "Moon Lady." The old nurse crossed herself with 2 fingers against her brow. Rowan heard it. His eyes went back to Seraphina's torn collar, where the silver mark lay hidden under a borrowed wool shawl. "Walk with me." It was not a request, but it was not a command like Darius would have given in front of witnesses. He waited while she eased her hand from Leora's and pulled on patched boots 2 sizes too large. Outside, Frostmere breathed in its sleep. The city under the mountain was all blue shadows and amber lanterns, with icicles hanging from stone bridges like glass teeth. Somewhere below, water dripped steadily into a cistern. Rowan led her through a narrow passage where frost feathered the walls, past 2 guards who straightened so fast their spear but struck the floor. "My king," one murmured, then his eyes flicked to Seraphina and dropped. Again. That strange, unwilling bow. "Why do they do that?" she asked. Rowan did not answer until they reached a circular courtyard open to the night sky. Snow fell through the mountain's hollow crown, slow and silent, landing on a wide stone basin at the center. Inside it lay a pool frozen solid, its surface cloudy white, veined with black cracks that did not move. Around the rim, carved wolves raised their faces to a moon worn smooth by age. The air felt different here, thin, listening. "This is the Moonwell," Rowan said. His voice had lost its dry edge. "When it flowed, our fields grew under frost. Our sick recovered. Children born too early lived." He touched the stone rim with bare fingers, and nothing happened. "It froze 20 years ago, the night our queen was murdered." Seraphina looked at the dead ice. A pulse answered beneath her collarbone. "Why bring me here?" "Because that prayer was sung only by her blood." The words landed between them, quiet and impossible. Seraphina stepped back. "No, I'm from the south. I was raised in Vale House. I was married in Blackthorn. I am nobody's lost," the mark burned. Not pain this time. Recognition. Heat spread down her chest and into her palm, drawing her forward before pride could stop her. Rowan caught her wrist. "Seraphina, don't touch it unless you mean to." She looked at his hand around her wrist, then at his face. For once, the guarded king looked almost afraid. "Mean to do what?" she whispered. The ice cracked before he could answer. A silver line shot from the place her fingers hovered above the surface, racing across the Moonwell with a sound like a rifle split in the cold. In the courtyard, wolves dropped to one knee, guards, healers, stable hands crossing with buckets, every one of them hitting stone as if their bodies had heard an older command than any alphas. Rowan fought it longest. She saw the tremor in his shoulders, the strain in his jaw. Then his knee struck the snow. Miles south, in Blackthorn's Air Chapel, Darius stood before the blessing altar with Calder at his side and a new chain for some future queen coiled on black velvet. The white stone altar split down the middle so hard the candles blew out. Back in Frostmere, Seraphina yanked her hand away from the Moonwell, breathing fast as silver light glimmered under the ice. Rowan remained kneeling, staring up at her as if the world had just named her in a language he had been born to obey. Then from somewhere deep beneath the frozen basin, something knocked. Back. The knock rolled through the stone under Seraphina's boots, 3 slow strikes, and every lantern in the courtyard guttered blue. Rowan rose first, snow clinging to one knee of his dark trousers, his voice gone low. "Open the Elder Hall." The guards moved before the words finished. Seraphina hugged the wool shawl tighter around her torn dress, but it did nothing against the heat blooming under her collarbone. Beneath the ice, a shadow shifted, not a body, not quite a wolf, more like moonlight trying to remember its shape. "Rowan," she said, but he was staring at the well with the face of a man hearing his mother's voice through a wall. The eldest Frostmere woman arrived wrapped in white fox fur, her silver hair braided with bone beads that clicked softly as she walked. Old Nurse Mela came behind her, carrying a cedar box with both hands. When the elder saw Seraphina, she did not bow. She wept. One tear slipped down the canyon of her cheek and froze at her jaw. "Her eyes," she whispered. "Marin's eyes." Seraphina stepped back, so fast her heels scraped stone. "Don't call me that. Don't put ghosts on me because I sang some song." Mela set the cedar box on the Moonwell rim. Inside lay a baby bracelet of tarnished silver, a scrap of blue wool, and a charcoal portrait cracked with age. A young queen holding an infant with a crescent and crown mark beneath the left collarbone. Seraphina's fingers went numb. That is impossible. The elder touched the portrait as if it might bruise. The last moon queen died here 20 winters ago. Her child did not. A southern nurse smuggled the baby through the ash tunnels before the palace burned. Rowan's eyes snapped to Mela. You knew. Mela's mouth trembled. I knew a child had lived. I did not know where she had been buried. I wasn't buried, Seraphina said, but the words sounded thin. The elder opened a second compartment in the box and lifted a blackened charm on a broken chain. It pulsed once, ugly and red, when it neared Seraphina's skin. Her birthmark answered with a sting that made her gasp. Not buried, the elder said. Sealed. Someone placed a suppressing charm over your blood before you could shift, before your wolf could speak. It would make healers read emptiness where power slept. It would make a queen look barren to men who only knew how to count heirs. The courtyard went silent except for the drip of thawing frost from a carved wolf's jaw. Far south, Darius stood alone in the wrecked air chapel, wax from blown-out candles cooling on his knuckles while Merrick's blood report lay open across the split altar. He had read it 6 times. The numbers did not say infertile. They bent in a pattern he remembered from old war texts: lunar suppression, royal masking, living blood hidden under a false winter. Marek stood by the door with his coat buttoned wrong, face gray. Who told you to change the conclusion? Darius asked. Merrick's lips moved without sound. Darius crossed the chapel in 3 strides and slammed the report against his chest. Say his name. The healer flinched. Calder. The inner council. They said if her Frostmere blood woke, she could bind both thrones, and no council would ever hold a king by the throat again. Darius looked down at the cracked altar, and for the first time since the throne hall, his calm did not return. She was never barren. Marek shook his head, crying now, quiet and useless. No, Alpha. She was hidden. A horn screamed outside Blackthorn, not the mournful northern call, but a war alarm, sharp enough to rattle chapel glass. A guard burst in, snow on his shoulders and fear in his eyes. Your Majesty, Lord Calder's men are gone from the barracks. The old tunnel maps are missing. Back at the Moonwell, Seraphina's mark burned white-hot as the ice below her split another inch, and from deep under Frostmere, an iron door began to open. The sound came from below the courtyard, a rusted groan that shuddered through the Moonwell rim and sent old snow sliding from the carved wolves' backs. Rowan drew his sword. Get her inside. Seraphina barely had time to turn before the mountain alarm roared, 3 horns from the western gate, 2 from the lower farms, then a bell clanging wild somewhere under the stone. Boots hammered through passages. A guard skidded into the courtyard, cheeks raw from cold. Blackthorn banners at the pass. Rowan's face went still in that dangerous way she had learned to read. How many? Enough. The elder grabbed Seraphina's wrist with fingers like winter branches. Child, the tunnels. But the iron door beneath the well gave another shriek, and the floor split along a seam hidden under years of frost. From the darkness below came the smell of wet stone, old smoke, and men who had traveled too long underground. Blackthorn wolves poured up through the opening in gray cloaks stripped of royal pins, their blades wrapped in cloth to keep them from ringing. Seraphina saw Calder's cane first, silver wolf head catching the blue lantern light as he climbed after them without hurry. There she is, he said, almost fondly. The mistake that survived. Rowan lunged, but 2 traders dragged a chain across the courtyard, and runes flared red along its length. Frostmere wolves hit the ground choking, not bleeding, not cut, just pinned by a magic that made their muscles seize. Rowan dropped to one knee, sword scraping sparks from stone, his teeth bared as he fought it. Seraphina ran toward him. A hand clamped over her mouth from behind, sour leather and sweat flooding her nose. She drove her elbow back, heard a grunt, twisted free for one breath, and saw Mela fall with a cry as a traitor shoved her aside. "Don't touch them," Seraphina shouted. Calder smiled. "Still begging for other people. That will make this easier." A silver relic flashed in his hand, thin as a letter opener, its handle carved with the same crescent and crown as her skin, but blackened at the edges. The moment it neared her collarbone, her knees buckled. Heat became pain. White filled her vision. They dragged her across the snow toward the Moonwell, her borrowed boots scraping, her shawl tearing loose and skidding under a guard's heel. Beyond the mountain gates, battle thundered closer, hooves, wolves, shouted commands cracking in the cold. Then Darius's voice cut through the chaos from the outer courtyard, harsh and unmistakable. "Blackthorn, stand down. Calder is the traitor." For half a second, Calder's smile twitched. Rowan heard it too. He forced himself upright against the red chain, blood running from one nostril. "Seraphina," he snarled, and the sound shook dust from the archways. Calder pressed the relic to her burning mark, and the world narrowed to ice under her palms, and Rowan fighting to reach her and Darius roaring orders she could not understand. "Open her," Calder said. "If Frostmere wants its queen, it can have what's left." The blade bit the edge of the silver birthmark, and beneath the frozen Moonwell, something ancient opened its eyes. The eyes were not beneath the ice, they were in her. Seraphina felt them open behind her ribs, felt claws stretch inside a part of her that had been asleep so long it woke angry. Calder leaned close, breath mint and old wine. "Hold still, girl." Seraphina's fingers, numb against the Moonwell rim, curled over the carved stone wolf. No, it came out small, but the well answered. The frozen basin boomed under her palms. Calder's men flinched. The relic shook against her collarbone, its blackened crescent hissing like a coal dropped in water. Seraphina turned her face toward Rowan, still fighting the red chain with his sword trapped under one knee, then toward the archway where Darius had just broken through with snow in his hair and bloodless fury in his eyes. For one terrible breath, both kings reached for her. One with command, one with terror. Seraphina stopped waiting to be rescued. She seized Calder's wrist, dragged the relic away from her skin, and pressed her burning birthmark straight down onto the frozen Moonwell. The pain vanished. Silence snapped into place so complete she heard a single bead from the elder's braid hit stone. Then the charm inside her broke. Not like glass. Like a locked door kicked open from the other side. Silver light burst from her collarbone, racing over the ice in branching veins, up the carved wolves, across the courtyard stones, through every red rune on the chain until they blew out one by one with sharp little cracks. Rowan sucked in air and surged to his feet. Calder stumbled back, shielding his face. "Impossible." Seraphina lifted her head, and when she spoke, another voice moved under hers, low, lunar, crowned in winter. "You called me empty because you were afraid of what was full." The Moonwell split open. Clear water, black and bright under the moon, surged up over the rim and splashed across Seraphina's bare hands. Steam rolled through the courtyard, smelling of rain on pine and thawed earth. Far below the mountain, a deep grinding answered as Frostmere's gates opened by themselves. Beyond them, past the pass and the battle-churned snow, the dead fields flashed green in waves, first the low barley, then the orchard branches, then the white hillsides breaking with shoots beneath melting frost. Wolves began to howl from the farms, from the walls, from the tunnels. Not alarm. Recognition. Darius stepped into the courtyard with his sword lowered, his face stripped of every royal mask he had ever worn. His eyes found the woman he had cast out barefoot in a white dress, the infertile Omega his hall had judged beneath the moon crest. Only she was no longer bent in the snow. She stood in thaw water and silver light, hair lifted by a wind that smelled of spring, Rowan at her side with one hand hovering near her back, but not touching until she allowed it. Around them, Frostmere wolves poured into the courtyard by the hundreds, then thousands, soldiers with torn sleeves, nurses with stained aprons, stable boys, elders, children clutching blankets. One by one, they dropped to their knees. The sound rolled outward, flesh and armor and palms striking wet stone. Rowan looked at Seraphina, and with no shame, no hesitation, the Alpha King of Frostmere knelt too. "Seraphina Vale," he said, voice rough enough to break, "blood of Barren, winter-crowned, heart of the Moonwell, Frostmere chooses you." The courtyard shook with her name. Queen Seraphina. Queen Seraphina. Darius stood alone at the arch, every Blackthorn soldier behind him staring past his crown to the woman their kingdom had thrown away. Calder tried to crawl toward the fallen relic, but Leora, tiny in her blanket at the infirmary door, pointed and whispered, "Bad man." A dozen Frostmere wolves pinned Calder before his fingers touched silver. Seraphina looked at Darius then, and the old mate bond pulled once between them, thin and aching. His mouth opened. No command came out. Only her name. The Moonwell water climbed her wrist like living light, forming a silver chain where blackthorns had been removed, and somewhere deep beneath the courtyard, the ancient wolf spoke one word no one else could hear. "Choose. Choose." The word settled in Seraphina's bones as the courtyard held its breath around her, all those bowed heads shining with Moonwell water and melted snow. She looked first at Calder, pinned face down against the stone, his silver wolf cane snapped beneath a guard's boot. Then she looked past him to Marek, who had been dragged in by two Blackthorn soldiers, his healer's coat hanging open, the false blood report clutched in one shaking hand. This time, the royal healer looked at her. His eyes were red, his mouth trembling so hard the first words broke apart. "I lied," he said, and the sound carried because no one dared move. The test showed suppression, not infertility. The council ordered the conclusion changed. He swallowed, staring at the water around her feet. Her body was never empty. "We made the record empty." A low growl rolled through both armies. Darius stepped forward, but not far. For once, he stopped before anyone had to make him. Snow melted in his dark hair and ran down the side of his face like sweat. He drew the Blackthorn signet from his finger and dropped it onto the whetstone at Seraphina's feet. "Lord Calder and every lord sworn to him are stripped of rank," he said, voice rough, not royal smooth now, not polished for a throne hall. "Their lands return to the packs they starved. Their names will be read with their crimes." Calder spat water from his mouth. "You need us." Darius did not look at him. "That is the lie I mistook for law." Then his gaze lifted to Seraphina, and the old bond between them pulled once, weak as a thread caught on a nail. "I disgraced you because I was afraid of losing a crown," he said. His hands hung open at his sides. "They lied. I chose to believe them. That cowardice was mine." The courtyard stayed silent except for Leora's little sniffle by the infirmary door. Seraphina touched the silver chain of water at her wrist, then pressed her palm over the crescent and crown beneath her collarbone. The mark no longer burned. It glowed steady, the same shape carved into the Moonwell, the same crest on the bracelet in Mela's cedar box, the same sign the oldest wolves had whispered over without understanding why their knees bent. Winter-crowned. Not broken. Not misplaced anymore. She turned toward Darius. His face tightened, bracing for hatred. She gave him something harder. "Peace. I release you," she said. The words left her mouth clean and bright. The mate bond snapped with a sound only wolves heard, soft, final, like ice giving way under spring sun. Darius staggered one step, hand to his ribs, but he did not reach for her. Seraphina breathed in, and for the first time in years, nothing in her chest answered to pain. Rowan stood beside the Moonwell, still kneeling in the thaw water, waiting with his head bowed, though every wolf in his kingdom had already named her queen. He did not claim her. He did not speak over the silence she had earned. Seraphina walked to him, bare feet numb on the stone, hem soaked and heavy, silver light trailing from her wrist. Only when she held out her hand did he take it. His fingers closed around hers, warm and careful. The new bond rose between them slowly, not a chain, not a command, more like a door opening onto firelight. Rowan's voice was low enough for her alone. "At your pace, my queen." She smiled then, and the sight of it made Mela cover her mouth and cry into her sleeve. Behind them, the Moonwell spilled over its rim and ran in shining streams through the courtyard channels that had been dry for 20 winters. Far beyond the gates, Frostmere's fields steamed green beneath the thinning snow. Children laughed first. Then the wolves howled, thousands of voices climbing into the open mountain crown where the moon hung clear and white. Seraphina looked once toward the south, toward black marble halls and a throne where a healer had once refused to meet her eyes. Then Rowan lifted the old Frostmere crown, not gold, but silver pine branches woven around a moonstone, and lowered it gently onto her damp hair. No one asked for an heir. No one spoke of an empty future. The crown rested there anyway.